I'm so happy today to have Eric Fruits here. Thanks for coming, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
Um, here's my stupid joke. I'm Andy Vegetables. This is Kristen Legumes. No, I'm just kidding. You probably get that all the time, right?
Didn't get that version, but that's a good one. So
Okay.
you get credit for originality.
Trying. Okay.
No, for originality.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Thanks so much for coming, Kristen. Thanks for
Thank you
being
for having
here.
me.
Yeah. Um, I was gonna also say this is not really a joke, but I thought you hated me online for a while.
What? What'd I do?
So, but you're here obviously.
What did I do?
No,
To make you
I don't
think
know.
that?
I don't know why I thought
I
that,
try
but
to be nice online.
I think you are. No, you're really intelligent online. I like your posts. I learn a lot from you all the
No,
time.
thanks.
What's your Twitter handle in case people want to find you?
It's pretty easy. It's my name, Eric Fruits.
There you
And
go.
gives me some accountability so I won't be too much of a jerk because they'll know exactly who I am. I'm
Yeah.
not like Fruit Dog 88 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the nondescript picture or cartoon or
Totally.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anonymous, whatever. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this stuff because I just love talking economics, and especially in Portland. There's a lot going on. So yeah, thanks for coming. And I wanted to get started with just telling people a little bit about your background and
Yeah, sure. I have a PhD in economics. Got that in '97. Met my wife when I was in grad school. She's from Portland, so we lived in LA for a little bit. And then when my second son was getting to be around 2 years old, we decided LA is not a good place to raise kids, and so she wanted to move back home. And I said, I'll move up to Portland. The only requirement is we're not renting anymore. So we bought a tiny little house near 39th and Powell and moved in there. That was in 2002
Southeast.
in Southeast.
Where did you meet and what grad school were you at when you
I
met?
was at Claremont Graduate School. My wife was at Scripps.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then her grandparents passed away, and so then we bought their house in Laurelhurst from the estate, and so that's where we
Wow.
live now.
nice.
It's the only way I
And
could afford to live in Laurelhurst.
Were you always just into the economy and finance and that kind of stuff? Or
Well, in undergraduate, I was a business major. I wanted to study history, but I said, you know what? I kind of want to get a job. I figured what I'll do is I'll get my business degree. That way I can always get a job. And if I want to go back to grad school, I'll go do my history degree. And discovered I liked economics when I was in undergrad, and worked for a little while at what used to be called Anderson Consulting. Now it's Accenture. And then one of the many recessions hit, and that was after the first Gulf War. And then I decided to go to grad school, like a lot of other people. And so that's where I met my wife.
got your doctorate there?
Got a master's and then a doctorate.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm like the least college educated person here, so
that's pretty me.
I have
You're
no
the
degrees.
smartest.
I have no degrees.
Yeah, what are your thoughts about the economics of degrees these days? We had a conversation like that
Oh,
with Professor Michael Weingrad, and it was really interesting to hear from a professor say things like, they're not for, I mean, I think that's always been true, but just more like they're not a good investment for everybody.
I think that's the right way to put it. I mean, I teach at Portland State part-time, so I don't want to dump
Yeah,
on
no,
higher
of course.
education, but I think um, it's really changed. Years ago, even when I was an undergrad, I think it was a lot about getting an education. There was a certain amount of credentialing. I mean, look at my own story. I decided I wanted to get a business degree because I wanted to get a job, not because I liked business. And I think that's carried through, and I think it's amplified over time. But the problem with that over time also is that value has diminished, and as you would say, the return on investment
Yeah,
has
that's what
gone
he talked
down.
about a lot. Was this
Yeah,
other
yeah,
professor
yeah,
did?
yeah. So I mean, I think the return on investment has really gone down. So like
In what way do you think? Yeah.
well, I think it's what some people call elite overproduction. In other words, now that everyone, well, not quote unquote everyone, has a degree, the value of having a degree is much
Kind of
lower
waters it
because
down.
oh, I've got a bachelor's. Well, so do I. So do I. So everyone has a bachelor's. And so I think and for a while, then the trick was, oh, well, gee, since everyone's got a master or bachelor's, now I should go get a master's or an MBA. And I think that value has really declined. And I look at someone like my son, who he's 25, graduated from college 3 or 4 years ago. And, when he got out of college, he was thinking, I might go on for a master's degree at
Hmm.
some point. Now, Totally out of the question. It has no interest. I mean, he has a decent job or had a decent job. He decided to quit that job, and now he's in Thailand traveling for the next few months,
Mm.
which because he made a lot of money and saved it up and is able to do that. But, he's just realized that that return on investment isn't there,
Yeah.
because, for a lot of graduate schools, especially master's degrees, you're paying full freight. If you're in a PhD program, I think, well, what a lot of people don't understand is that um, you either don't pay or you make a little bit of money. So like when I left graduate school, I think I had like $4,500
Mm.
in debt
Mm-hmm.
from graduate school because the school paid my tuition, and I had research assistantships and so forth that paid most of the bills. And so actually that $4,500 was mostly just for living expenses.
Right.
When I look at my tax returns from back then, it's like I made $12,000 that year. I don't even remember how I lived. I wasn't hungry,
Right.
and I paid my rent.
Yeah. Well, you're making me. I didn't have this on my list of questions, but I ask a lot of my guests about debt forgiveness in college. I'm curious, what do you think about what like this current White House has been doing with that? And the Supreme Court shot down the main thing, but
That's a tough one because it is really politically popular, especially
yeah, it
among
is.
the
Yeah.
people who got it.
Yeah.
Well, of course. But I don't know that are the majority of Americans going to college, are they?
I think a lot of them are. I mean,
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
if
then
you look
that's why
out
it would
there,
be popular.
actually it's been pretty stable over time, right? You've got
Is it
roughly
dropping?
a little more than a third of the adult population has a bachelor's degree
Uh-huh.
or higher. And so that means, there's some people who went to college and
Of
didn't
course.
finish. I've got one son who that happened to, and it happens. So it's still it is still somewhat selective to be someone with a bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
But still a lot of people, especially in the circles we travel in. You said
I
you
have no.
don't.
I'm like one of your sons that you mentioned. I went to like 3 different colleges and dropped out of all of them. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, and that happens. But I think that's probably in the circles you travel now, that's pretty unusual.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm usually in the minority of
That's what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially in Portland,
Yeah.
probably, where, your barista has
Yeah.
a PhD.
And the most common thing that I hear is people my age or younger is that like the main takeaway that they got was just social experience. Like they're like, I was partying, I made friends. It was great for networking, even I guess for jobs,
Connections,
and I get that, but I don't
Well,
know.
see, and that's what changed with COVID, right? Because
Right.
when my kids were looking at schools, me, because I'm cheap, I said, well, why don't you get a job at Starbucks? Because
They
Starbucks
have a
will pay
college.
for your
They have
college
actually a pretty good college
online.
program. Yeah.
Arizona State University, it doesn't say on the diploma online degree,
Yeah.
just do that. It's free. And my wife says, no, 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 no. They need a college experience. I had a college experience. I loved it. My wife loved it. But it changed now. COVID really changed that.
Right.
So like my oldest son, he, 2.5 years of his college was, online
yeah.
and remote. He had a fairly good college experience, but it was really diminished. My other son who dropped out, I think one reason why he dropped out was because of COVID, because there just wasn't the joy you
There's
get from
no
social
There's no
interaction.
life, campus
experience.
There's no
life, and all that.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when when I was teaching at Portland State during COVID, we had classes online, and I think I only did 2 of them. And because I said to myself, well, a few things. I said, one, I kind of suck at this, and it's a nice self-reflection. I didn't like it. I don't think the students really liked it. And the other thing that really gets me is as I was going through my the classes I was teaching, and they want you to do what's known as asynchronous teaching. It's where you
Yeah.
record something and then show it. I'm like, dude, you go on YouTube. There are so many people who do it so much better with better production values than anything I can do in my basement. And, if I was a good teacher, I would just say, go watch these instead of listening to me. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's kind of,
I never thought about that actually.
it
It's
kind of
like
feels like cheating.
because there's when you reduce it to like a video, there's so many quality issues that would
Yeah.
put others in front of or above others, and so I never thought about that.
Oh, there's some that are just, off the hook, incredible with
Yeah.
great graphics. They explain it really
Mhm.
clearly. I mean, and you got some with terrible graphics like Khan Academy, which do a fantastic job
Mm.
of teaching stuff.
Mhm.
Right.
I remember once I had an intern who was working for me over the summer. He was enrolled at PSU, and he was watching some videos. And I said, what are you watching? He says, it's for this class. I'm like, well, don't you have a textbook? He says, yeah, they have a textbook, but I don't like reading the textbook. The videos are so much better.
Mhm.
He was learning stuff for his class on YouTube. And
Yeah.
that's how so many people do stuff now.
And that's what I tell people too. I'm like, if I ever have kids, or what I would tell young people is just learn on YouTube. Like everything you could ever want to learn about is
That's
on
how I
there.
learned how to tie a bow tie,
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
which is a lot easier than you think. It's like a 30-second video.
Okay.
But
Yeah. I don't think I've ever done. I've done the tie, but not the bow tie. Yeah. That's interesting though. Yeah. I'm curious about your take on what I'm thinking mostly downtown Portland, but just Portland in general, the state of the economy in Portland in 2024, because there was this big controversy, I don't know, a month or two ago, when I think Trump called it destroyed in some speech or whatever. And a lot of people agree with that. Some people disagree. I think it's somewhere in the middle, because I know neighborhoods that literally do look destroyed. And then there's other neighborhoods that are beautiful in Portland. So I'm just curious of like,
well, I like to look at my mom who lives in Ohio and gets a steady diet of Fox News
yeah,
every waking minute, and
she thinks Antifa's covered the city. And
everywhere
yeah.
that there every
Mhm.
place is on fire, that there's a dumpster on every corner that's on
Mhm.
fire,
Right,
that
right, right.
rats and bats are running rampant throughout the city, and there's a homeless person with a baseball bat ready to kill
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
And then she comes and visits. She goes, oh, it's actually kind of nice here. I'm like, yeah, it's mom, it is kind of nice. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing, is that there's pockets, right? You know, I could drive from my neighborhood in Laurelhurst into downtown, and you go through that part in the Central East Side, and it still
It's bad, yeah.
looks like Escape from New York,
Yeah.
right? And then you could get downtown, and there's pockets that are bad, but there's now pockets that are really nice. There's still a lot of boarded up stores, and those are closed down, and I think that's a real shame. But I think we hit bottom a few years ago,
Okay.
and
Okay.
we're on the upswing, but we're not anywhere near where we once were. You
What do
know,
you think is really nice
what do I
downtown? What do you think is nice downtown? Really nice.
Well, I think Slabtown, which is, I wouldn't really
Yeah,
consider it
I don't
downtown.
think
It's
that's
on the
downtown.
outskirts.
Yeah, it's northwest.
I think that area right around the new Ritz is
Hmm.
starting to get pretty nice. Um, that's There's still,
I think
you
they're
know, you
hoping it is. Yeah.
they're hoping it is. You've got what we used to call Paranoia Park
Mm-hmm.
is going to get rebuilt into the Darcel 15 Park.
Which one is that?
That's the one that used to be above the parking garage. It's
The
on
one by Big Pink is the one.
um
I know they
no-
just broke ground on that.
yeah, the one that just broke
Yeah.
ground on. Yeah, it's kind of in a kind of a weird triangle. Um it used to be O'Brien Square,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
that's
was
right.
the brick kind of
Yeah,
park.
it's
that-
all
Yeah,
yeah.
it was always a sad park.
Yeah.
concertina wire and yeah.
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 I mean, it was sad when it was a park.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of glad they got rid of it. I hope they do something nicer with it. I think if you get, kind of down around Pioneer Place is pretty nice, and I think that's just because there's a lot of right now, especially in the summer, there's a lot
Right.
of tourist activity, and
Activities.
I
Yeah.
think that, I think the more problematic residents of the city don't really like to be around that kind of activity, and so that's kind of kept them away. I think that a lot of the improvement, especially over the past year, has been because of the ADA settlement with the city, because that mandated through a settlement, a court order, that the city expend resources to clear tents and debris from sidewalks so that people with disabilities can access those sidewalks. And I think that's been a really important part of it. And I've actually been working with the attorney on that. We've been monitoring it, and the city's been doing a pretty good job of sticking with that agreement.
Well,
And so I
yeah.
think, yeah.
I was
So
gonna say thanks for doing that. Yeah, I'm glad somebody's keeping an eye on it.
well, I was kind of working on the background. The real work was done by John DiLorenzo and the plaintiffs themselves. So
Right.
there were about
And shout out to Tiana, who's
Tiana and
Tiana
others.
Tozer.
Yeah, Tiana Tozer and a lot of the other people who aren't as public facing, who really worked hard on this. I mean, they were
Very brave.
and and the disabled population is the largest minority population in the United States.
Yeah,
And it's one of the most, it is a unique minority population because there is pretty close to 100% chance at some point in our lives every one of us will be in that group for some
Right,
reason
that's
or other.
true.
That's interesting.
As
And
we
so
age, yes.
yeah, as we age, or you break your leg or
Right,
Yeah.
or like Tiana, you get hit by a car.
but yeah. So and I think that's really
Drunk driver.
been a huge improvement was with the ADA. Going back, so as I mentioned, I moved here in 2002, and it's just amazing. If you took a snapshot from 2002 to today, right? 2002, Vera Katz was mayor. All the headlines seem to be Portland, Oregon, the most livable city in the country, most livable city in the world, right? That was our claim to fame. And Vera Katz hated cars. She really hated billboards and murals. And I don't know if you remember
Really?
her
Okay.
at all. She
didn't want him downtown. Or
she didn't
anywhere.
want them anywhere.
Right.
It was, to me, it was like Captain Ahab with the white whale. She just really hated murals. I remember there was some place down in off Division. There's a little thing, it was like a thrift store, and they had this really nice painting on their garage. It was there for years. And when she put in the sign code, as she called it, man, the city just hassled those people left and right
Really?
over just a mural that was already there.
It's like the mural police coming out.
Oh yeah, yeah, and so, but see, that's what's really interesting is that we had the resources to do dumb livability things. I might disagree with the sign code, but you can argue that there's a livability component.
Yeah.
Vera Katz always like to say, we don't want Portland to look like Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So like, okay, like that would ever happen.
It's a big stretch.
But
I see what you're saying, like that, they had resources to allocate to livability stuff.
You walk downtown and they had these giant concrete trash cans on every corner that were
I
emptied
remember that.
every day.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
forgot about that,
Every day
yeah.
they were, and now it's like, oh, we don't have the resources to empty the garbage cans. And a couple of years ago, when I took my daughter to go look at colleges, she was looking at a school in New Orleans, and we decided to stay by Bourbon Street because that's what you do. And, we're right off Bourbon Street. Every single morning, street sweepers came through.
Yeah.
Street sweepers,
Yeah.
the water and everything,
They
cleaning
have
off this.
mounted patrol too, and they're out there every night.
And so it's amazing to me that a city that's supposed to be as prosperous as Portland, somehow or another doesn't have the resources to do just basic things like
Yeah.
pick up the garbage.
I mean,
doesn't
but we
seem-
have it, right? I mean, we're swimming in money. They have it.
They have it. It's just that they've decided to spend it on other
Right.
things because other
Yeah.
things are more fun and
Yeah,
more
it's not like
sexy.
we don't have resources.
Right, you're not going to get out the impossibly large scissors and do a ribbon cutting on a garbage can, right?
We just don't want to do it. Yeah.
No, but man, you open up a new streetcar, you're going to get scissors that are about 10 feet tall to
Yeah.
cut that ribbon.
Yeah.
And
Well, it
that's,
seems like the way you just said it, like they're not valuing, even as not only as a tourist kind of area, but even just for local people, they don't value
Basic sanitation,
Yeah.
just civilization.
don't value that livability component.
yeah, because, and I mean,
So basic.
COVID did a lot, right? It drove a lot of workers out of downtown.
Right.
And that's something that the city really can't do anything
Right. It's
about.
like
And
kind of a
that's-
national problem.
And it's changed. I mean, it has affected a lot. It's affected downtown. It's affected civic organizations.
But
I
it
mean,
also seemed like they didn't even attempt to. I mean, these negotiations that they entered into with their employees about coming back to work, that was way later. I mean, that was after, that was so far after everybody else in the country had that was the best observational experiment in the world. I mean, we had 2 outdoor mask mandates. I'm sure you remember.
Yeah.
I mean, we were total weirdos. But like, you look around the rest of the country, there are kids going to school, there are people going to work. They're not all dropping dead. I mean, it was a great observational study. They're going to football games. They're filling stadiums, and we can't walk around downtown because it's too dangerous.
Yeah. I mean,
It was really strange. And the city wasn't even like trying to get on board with what was actually going on.
But see, I think, like I said, COVID was a big deal. But the thing is that it's been more long simmering, right? So we started in 2002
Yes.
for me with the best city in the world, most livable city in the world. But what's happening, it's kind of like winning the lottery, right? And, the people who win the lottery, they always end up broke. And we're like, oh, we've got all this capital built up. We could spend it. We can make things a little bit worse. We could take away the garbage cans. We don't have to pick up the garbage as frequently. We don't have to go
twice a
clean
month.
up the graffiti every day.
Kind of
that just
death by 1,000 cuts.
it's just a
kind
lot of
thing.
1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
And and a lot of people talk about the homelessness problem and tie it to COVID, but you have to wind it back. We've always had a homeless problem. Bud Clark
Right.
in 1988 made
That
national
was
news
part
with
of
his
his
12-point
campaign.
plan.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a drug addiction and fentanyl problem.
It to a certain
At
extent
that
is drug and
point.
alcohol, because his
A lot of alcohol. Yeah.
his mantra was, we want to help those who want it, be firm with those who don't,
Yeah.
and then create a livable space for everyone else.
And
And it was
that's
a
the
much
part
smaller
I was just thinking, that's the part you don't
population.
hear anymore. Is
No, you don't hear that.
The firm part is the part you don't hear anymore.
No, you don't.
Yeah, and he pushed really hard for involuntary commitment.
Right.
That if
Right.
some of you might remember the Cheers van, which
Yeah,
Yes.
which they his thing was that the Cheers van comes in, if you're a frequent flyer, 3 times or more that you're picked up on that, then they would find a way to put
Get
you
you to
off
treatment.
into some sort of
Yeah.
rehab. It never passed because we have very liberal or strict rules on involuntary commitment,
It's very
and so
libertarian. Yeah.
that's a political decision. But anyway. And then fast forward 2005, you may recall that the city in Multnomah County had the 10-year plan to end homelessness. Never really went anywhere. At the end of that 10 years,
Obviously.
2015, that was really when the crisis hit. There's something that happened. I've been trying to figure out what happened around 2014, 2015, where things really flipped. I think house prices went up. We had a huge influx of people.
Charlie Hale started that safe sleep.
And
That's what I
Charlie,
hear
And said,
about.
just go
Charlie
ahead
Hales
and
responded
sleep.
to that with the safe sleep and the outdoor camping. And that's when things
Sleep
really...
wherever you want all night. We won't bug you.
Yeah, and I remember in Laurelhurst Park, it got so
remember
bad
that.
that the city brought out little orange Home Depot buckets.
Yeah.
Literally a pot to piss in.
Yeah. So
or
people
poop
could
in,
take a dump.
so that you could go poop in a bucket in the city park. But that didn't. I mean, that did happen overnight. But how we got there didn't happen overnight.
Right,
it was
right.
just the 1,000 cuts over time.
Gradual, yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, in my opinion, a lot of it was Deborah Kofori in the joint office of homeless services of the county.
Yeah, and I still think about, I mean, now it's Bobby Lakes, but when she turned down the whole
Yeah.
Wapato jail thing, and how could
Just no
anyone not be
interest.
kicking themselves after
No
that?
interest in sheltering
Yeah.
people. No interest in any
Oh,
kind
and
of...
there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, they hated the fact that that you're supposed to be sober when you checked in. And even Bobby Lake says, you have to be sober when you come in, even if it's your first day of being sober. So
I mean, they'll
it's
help
a pretty low
you.
threshold.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Yeah,
it is a
even if your first day, and they'll help you. Like if you're like, I don't know that I could even make it through my first day, they will connect you with people to help you.
And that was wild because with Bobby Lakes, you had some really powerful Democrats who were
Yes.
supporting. You had Betsy Johnson,
Yeah.
and I think Elizabeth Steiner Hayward. You had some real
Yeah.
heavy swingers.
Jordan
Juggernaut.
Schnitzer's project.
Jordan Schnitzer, yeah. And so it's a real shame that they didn't back that up. It's even more shocking. She'd rather have it be an empty jail.
Right.
It's kind of like
Well, actually buy it. And the best part was buy it,
Sell it
leave it empty,
at a loss.
and then say, instead of selling it, I'm going to raise it. I'm going to destroy it.
Mhm.
We're going to pay to turn it to rubble. That blew my mind. I mean, that was around the time that I was like, what is going on over at the county?
yeah, it's one of those things where you wonder if someone has like pictures that people shouldn't see. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
some of the decisions they make just seem so um, just don't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like, it's where
I think they're
you almost have to
ideological.
become a conspiracy theorist
Well,
because
yeah.
That's just a decision I think about a lot. And just like you can just clearly see this trajectory and path that we're on, and that was like a key component of just like, hey, we didn't give a shit about shelters or any of this stuff, and
It's not a
and
priority.
now it's just out of control and growing every year. And
well, and the other problem too is the fentanyl and the meth. I mean,
That's right.
we always had a meth problem, but it's kind of wild because I think, again, trying to do the right thing, but they do the wrong thing. I remember once I was doing a debate on K2, and Ginny Burdick was on the panel, and I remember I was just sick as a dog with a cold, and I said, before the cameras were, I said, I want to kill the person who banned the cold medicine. And she's like,
I remember,
oh, and she's like, oh, I'm very proud of that measure. I'm like, well, I'm not happy right now. I was so sick. And it turns out that when they banned the cold medicine, because of making the meth,
meth, yeah.
the drug manufacturers went to another approach to making it.
Of course they did.
And so that new approach actually created a slightly different formulation of meth that actually
P2P meth.
P2P meth, which causes the psychosis.
Yeah.
And so
So that's a direct
Sam
response to
Quinones has a great article.
that's
in the
it from Sam
Atlantic about
Quinones.
it.
Yeah. And then the other part is too fentanyl, which is, actually in some ways a miracle drug. I mean, if you
Right.
as a
if you-
painkiller, yeah.
if you have cancer or something like that, it's really, because the way
Or
fentanyl works
surgery.
is it's really strong. It works really fast, but it also leaves your system really fast, which is great if you got something like cancer. Terrible if you're an addict, right? Because you always need to keep getting more to keep that supply. Plus, the quality control on fentanyl is so terrible, where you can have a pill, fake oxy pill that's all fentanyl. Cut that pill into 4 pieces. 3 of those pieces may not have any fentanyl, and the last one has it all, and that's how it kills you dead. I think we were not prepared for either one of those things. The nice thing, quote unquote, nice thing about fentanyl is it's synthetic opiate. So a lot of the ways that you can treat opiates, and there's medical treatments you could do for opiates, like Suboxone and so forth, that those could be effective methods of treating fentanyl addiction. But for meth, there's really no decent medical intervention that you could do on meth. And so if you're addicted to meth, it's a lot harder to get off of meth because you don't have those medical
like
interventions.
medically assisted treatment options.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no
Right.
methadone or whatever equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the evidence suggests that 12-step programs are kind of successful. There's a big debate about 12-step programs, but there's a lot of evidence that if you combine, say, a 12-step program with the medically assisted programs, that it could be much more effective combined. But I think it's something that this was completely unanticipated. It happened around the same time as the homeless epidemic started happening here, but there were a lot of other things too, because rents were rising. I was people. I think someone posted something about Jack Badansky was posting about Chloe Daly and Joanne Hardesty, and the one I think about a lot is Chloe Daly, who I think a lot of people would say was a terrible commissioner, but when she was elected, she was the perfect candidate for that time. I mean, she talk about being at the right place at the right time
for the era. Yeah.
For the era, right? You had Steve Novick, who who's a genius. You just have to ask him. Did you know he went to Harvard? Yeah, well, he did. But and he kind of grates on people, and he doesn't have really good personality for a politician. So he had that going against him. Plus, this was when we started seeing huge increases in rent, and Chloe Daly's big thing was
housing,
tenant rights.
Yeah.
Those two things came together and just pushed her over the edge. And I think that's one reason why she lost, is the problem seemed to go. It wasn't as bad, or it was dealt with rent control and inclusionary zoning, which were terrible ideas that ended up passing. And it turns out she was just as acerbic as Steve Novick, and so.
I'm curious too, before I ask you about some of this other stuff, your take on, because I hear different things about the office space leasing downtown and how bad that is versus how I've heard that it's like really bad, but recently I've heard more people that are like, no, it's actually not
ticking
as bad.
up. It's ticking up. In fact, my brother-in-law owns a little software company, and they just moved
Got some
their
space.
office, well, from one part of downtown to another new
Mm.
building downtown. So they're staying. They had a perfect chance to leave,
Yeah.
and they decided to stay. You look at some larger law firms, they're staying downtown. But then you look at other places. I think one of the big things that's happening is um, if you have a company where you have a lot of workers who don't necessarily live in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a guy who does, he's an investment advisor working for B of A, and he used to live out in Washington County. So the Metro, and especially the Multnomah County Preschool for All tax comes in. And he's like, well, I live in Washington County. I don't have to pay the tax. No, you're taxed on where the money is made.
That's
So
right.
even if you
Right.
don't live in Multnomah County, but you work in Multnomah County,
You're
you
still
have to.
paying. Yeah.
Well, it turns out that everyone in his office was pretty much in that same position, and B of A closed that office,
Mm.
and he now lives in Vancouver and works in the Vancouver office of B of A.
Smart.
So instead of collecting a bunch of tax revenue from these people, they're now collecting zero from these people,
Right. Right.
and that's gutting certain segments of that downtown business, because
Yeah.
for the business he doesn't need to be downtown. He does all his work over the phone. Where downtowns are really important is where the whole point of a downtown is what's known as agglomeration, getting people together for face-to-face stuff. And so if you're working in a business or an industry that doesn't require that sort of face-to-face, the value of being downtown isn't there.
Right.
So lawyers meet face to face with their clients. It's useful to be downtown. Some bankers meet face to face. My work, I do public policy research. We are an all remote office. We've got 20 staff across the world. We meet once a year face to face. We do meet here in Portland, but we meet once a year face to face. We could do a lot of our work without having to interact face to face with
Yeah.
other people. And so, that's the real value of a downtown. And, COVID kind of blew up the whole face to face part. We realized we can meet on Zoom, which I still think is inferior. But also made people realize I don't need a space downtown to do what I'm doing. That a lot of the work we do can be remote.
Mm-hmm.
The city itself found out that a lot of the work its people do could be remote. They should really think about what that is. Like maybe they don't need as many PR people, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
And so that's it's a problem. It's not just a Portland problem.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, I'm curious specifically, like this vacancy problem. Obviously, yeah, the remote work's a national thing, but do you think Portland is in a worse sort of median position?
I think we
than-
are in a slightly worse position than
Okay.
other cities.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that it's an outlier in
Right.
terms of how bad it is. It's, if you ranked it, we're probably slightly below average
Okay.
in terms
Okay.
of good to bad. We're
Yeah.
slightly below average, but not at the bottom.
I believe that. Yeah, sounds accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the question is, how will that bounce back, or will it bounce back?
Right.
And there's a lot of things that are out of our control, because I think the world has changed since COVID
Yeah.
in terms of how people do their workflow. People like working at home.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah.
I like working at home.
Yeah.
I hate going to an office. For a while, I worked at Cascade Policy Institute, which is on a good day going there would be about a 20-minute drive in. Coming home, it'd be close to an hour. That's an hour and a half that I could be with my family,
Mhm.
doing something else, or just working.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's way more productive for me to take 13 steps down to my world headquarters in the basement than it is to hop in a car and drive around. Or even worse, get on TriMet.
Mhm.
I checked to see how long would it take me to get from my house to that office. Hour and a half one way on TriMet. It's like, come on.
Yeah. It's not really practical.
It's
Yeah.
not practical. And the thing is, when I work downtown, and a lot of times when I teach at PSU, because parking used to be so terrible around PSU, I take TriMet. And at the time, it was great. There was a bus that came every 15 minutes. The bus stop was a 4-minute walk from my house.
Mhm.
It was a straight shot downtown, like maybe 20 minutes. It was nice. I could read a book. But now it's 30 minutes between stops. Guaranteed I walk on, it's going to smell like someone's been hotboxing in there,
Right,
right?
right.
It just,
Or
it
is
just,
doing that.
it
Yeah.
just reeks.
Yeah.
I mean, I know some people think, oh, well, marijuana, it's such a wonderful flowery smell. Well, guess what? Some people think it stinks.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not just weed. There's
There's other
They
stuff.
did that study where it was meth covered on
Yeah.
TriMet
Fentanyl.
trains and
Fentanyl.
fentanyl and meth and
90% of
Yeah.
all surfaces.
So the trick is you got to make traveling pleasant. You've got to make the trips more frequent because the thing that the studies on transportation show that people value the time that they're traveling, that they're actually in motion, at about half their hourly compensation. So if you make $20 an hour,
that's 10.
it's worth about $10.
Okay.
You know, if you could save half an hour, you'd be willing to pay $10. But in terms of like walking and waiting or transfer time, it's valued at about 1.5 times
Okay.
your compensation, right? Because when you're walking or waiting, you can't do anything. So if you're on the bus, you could read, but if you're walking, you're in the rain, you can't read. You're walking, and some people may not like that, and so
there's no productivity or anything you can get out of that, really.
Yeah, and so one of the when you're looking at ways to boost ridership, it turns out that fares don't make much of a difference, speeds don't make much of a difference, but shrinking those waiting times is the real game changer in terms of boosting transit.
I know for me, I used to take it downtown every day, and that would have make a difference for me. Like nowadays, it is this reckoning I see in my head though of like, because I don't know if you saw that new TriMet ridership thing that was on Willamette Week, but there's still it's recovered a little bit, but it's still way below where we were in like 2018.
Oh yeah,
and I think for the problems you were just talking about, it may never get to that level again.
Well, I saw a study about a year ago where TriMet themselves said they probably will not recover to pre-pandemic levels until about 2040.
Yeah, which is that's a ways off. Yeah,
and it's funny, talking about back when I moved here in 2002 to kind of give you an idea of how things have changed. I go out for lunch almost every day and I get a burrito, and my goal was to be able to get a burrito and pay for bus fare with a $5 bill. Wow. So when I moved here, you could get a burrito for $3.50, and bus fare was $1.50.
Are you talking about the burrito stand that was near Pioneer Square? There was a burrito stand.
Oh,
I don't know. Everybody that was Shelley's.
That was Shelley's Honkin' Huge Burritos.
Maybe.
No, there's another one I liked. It was called,
and it was under $5.
I think it was just called Mexican Food, and it was run by this older couple. One guy only had 3 fingers, and they made awesome burritos. Then they got busted for fencing stolen goods out of the back of their food truck. So I mean, even back then, we had a little bit of a crime problem.
Yeah. Oh, always, sure.
I just feel like that's something that like I would call them transportation advocates don't think about it, because they want to see this like boom again, and it's like they're not thinking about the remote stuff that we're talking about of like people are staying at home more in general,
and they want people to stay out. Like that's the weirdest
so it's this
part.
weird kind of combative internal.
They all want to work from home, but they want everybody on TriMet, and it's like going where?
So, I don't know. I think about that stuff a lot. It's just interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if I was going downtown every day, if I was teaching at PSU every day, I would probably consider taking TriMet even now. Yeah. Because, I mean, parking is a big pain in the butt. Yeah. And, I mean, especially, with the new enforcement and with the parking kitting now. In the old days, you could plug your meter and you might be able to go a little over the maximum 2 hour, but now you can't, right? You try to top up your parking kitty, it says, no, sorry, your 2 hours is up, and where do you go? Yeah. And so you go to Smart Park.
Yeah. Okay, I want to move on to the arch tax. I know you have a lot to say about the arch tax.
Oh, the arch tax.
Yeah.
How do we do it quickly?
Just give people some context of how it, got on the ballot. It was on the ballot and all that stuff. And
it was on the ballot. I can't remember. It was like 2009 or so. Yeah. It's been a while.
Sounds about right.
So the arts tax, every year around March, you'll see that every local news station will have a little blurb like arts tax is coming due. It's like, because it's such an easy story to do. And then you get your little mailer from the Revenue Bureau says, make sure to pay your arts tax. And so the arts tax, it's $35 per person per head, for anyone who makes 1,000, who lives even a second in the city of Portland.
Really?
During the year.
And it's a city, not a county tax.
It's city tax.
Approved in 2012, it looks like.
2012.
Who lives for a second in the city?
And if
you've ever resided in the city.
So does like getting an Airbnb for a month, does that count?
Well, a resident of the city.
Okay. How do they define resident? Do you know?
Well,
I don't know. I thought that was really interesting when you said lives for a second in the city. I just thought,
She's got
boy, what does
the
resident
hard
mean?
legal questions.
Well,
Yeah.
see, you got to.
I mean, not that I
Since
want
you're a lawyer,
everybody to go running.
you've got to separate the de jure from the de
Of
facto.
course.
The de jure says, even if you're a resident for even a second, you had to pay, but
Okay.
and you have to make more than $1,000
Okay.
that year. But of course, PERS doesn't count.
Okay.
Right.
PERS revenue.
That's
doesn't-
right.
Yeah.
PERS
Yeah.
income doesn't count
Right.
toward that 1,000.
That's
But
right.
it's pretty easy for anyone to hit that 1,000.
Yeah.
Then you have to pay tax. And the de facto part of it is because it gets to the enforcement. So how do they enforce it? They enforce it by contacting the Department of Revenue, Oregon Department of Revenue, seeing if you filed taxes, looking at motor vehicle registration and voter registration. So they triangulate those things and figure out who's a resident. So
are they enforcing it? And if so, what is the enforcement mechanism? Is there some kind of interest or?
I was gonna say, the last I heard when I was working for the news is that they got a lot of heat for going after people in collections with it.
I remember
it was
that.
very unpopular, and then
Same
they
with
kind of
preschool
dropped
and
it. But
stuff,
I don't know.
yeah.
You might know better than that.
I don't know where they are now on that because it's.
I just know a lot of people who just aren't paying it. And it
The
doesn't seem
only
to be
more
of
unpopular
any consequence.
than the tax itself is the enforcement.
That's
Right.
not,
of
that's
that
not my
tax.
legal advice, but
And and the challenge is, you get people who move.
Yeah,
And
I've
they
heard
still come after you.
Yeah, I've heard some people I know that went, like many people went up to Clark County, and they say they still hound you after
Oh yeah, my
years or whatever. I don't know.
my son lived in DC for 2 years and they came after him in DC.
Yeah.
after him is in like an
Well, they're trying to collect, I'm guessing.
Sure. So like an email, hey, reminder, you didn't pay this yet?
Yeah.
Or like, hey, and now you're in collections, something.
No, it's just like,
Okay.
hey, you got to pay your own
You
tax.
owe,
Yeah. Because collections isn't cheap, and I think that's
No,
one of
it's
the
not cheap.
that's one of the problems you have is when
And
you
our
have
tax just isn't much.
doing collections on a $35 bill
Yeah.
is
How's that gonna work?
It's funny you were talking about some of this because one of my guests a couple weeks ago, who's a District 3 city council candidate, was also complaining about how costly just administering the taxes and also the way that they do it. I was saying like they'd probably have a much higher collection rate if you were able to do it not through this outside process of, hey, we're going to mail you this. You can just include it on your normal yearly taxes, but
I think you can on TurboTax.
this is what I was telling them is I try it every year, and you collect the thing, and then it just says, "Hey, go to the city website,
mail it in."
or mail it in."
Yeah. So I think that's, and the thing is, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't collect that much money. At its peak, it was bringing in like 15 million. It's bringing in way less than that. And so the thing is, I mean, the city could just write a check.
Oh yeah, of course it
for
could.
that. They could get rid of the arts tax tomorrow, and it wouldn't even be a rounding error. It would be like, have you ever seen Superman 3? Where he rounds off like the thousandth of a penny. That's the rounding you're talking about with the arts tax. When you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar budget and you have this tax that everyone hates.
Wildly unpopular.
Wildly unpopular that you could wipe out and the budget would not take a ding at all.
Right. And I was two things. I was going to say, first of all, can you explain to people, because I try to explain to people sometimes what they think it's for and what it's actually used for.
Oh, dude, you really want to get, because this is bonkers.
Because everyone I talk to, they think, oh, it's going right to schools.
No,
it started off as a massive scam. The massive scam was this group called RAC, which you may report got this
Recreation, Arts and Culture Council.
City,
and that has a long history of bad behavior, let's say, I guess, or poorly tracked finances.
I don't know. I just know it has a long history.
Something milder than malfeasance.
Doing its best to pound cultural institutions like the Art Museum and the Symphony right into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're most famous for hanging on to the statues that have not been replaced.
Right.
So it's always been kind of a weird thing. The city always gave it money, and I think it gets some portion of its money from the 2% for arts. That's part of the public construction projects. You're supposed to dedicate 2%.
It was I'm trying to remember. It was a metro governmental entity. It was or it was at least quasi-governmental, isn't it not?
It's a
But if I remember
Publicly
correctly, it's
chartered
Metro.
nonprofit. It's not Metro.
Okay, it's not.
No. So
It's a nonprofit?
it's a standalone that was publicly chartered.
What does that mean?
It's a nonprofit that was overseen by the city.
So, if I want to start a nonprofit, right, I can go get some directors and we go form a nonprofit as, individuals under the nonprofit name. But you can also have a government can form its own nonprofit. Kind of like the government can start a corporation. Amtrak is a federally chartered corporation. It's an actual corporation that acts like a corporation, but it's chartered by the federal government. So that's kind of how RAC is. And RAC stands for Regional Arts and Culture Council.
Yes.
So RAC for years and years is always looking for new ways to supplement its revenues. In fact, when I worked at Eco Northwest many, many years ago,
How do you spell that?
Eco Northwest,
What is
Econ
it?
Northwest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard of it, I think, yeah.
What is it?
It's an economic consulting firm.
Okay.
If you look around, Google it, almost every single public sector project where they're trying to justify something.
So you were looking at the economic data.
Well, they're like, how can we raise money? What are some ideas? And so, things like, they were considering things like a lodging tax, a restaurant tax. It just didn't matter if it had anything to do with arts. It's like, how can we get some more money into the Regional Arts and Culture Council? So then fast forward, and Sam Adams is sitting on city council, and this group comes up called the Creative Advocacy Network. And the Creative Advocacy Network says, we've got this great idea. It's going to be an arts tax, and the money's going to go fund the Regional Arts and Culture Council. Now, it turns out Sam Adams founded the Creative Advocacy Network. So he created this group that was designed to lobby him and the rest of the city council.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is wild. Yeah.
So Creative Advocacy Network and RAC say we've got this great idea for this arts tax, and and all the money will come to us to support all these great arts things. And Sam Adams, he's savvy, and other people pushed back and said, you got a big problem here. They will not go for this. You're going to pay extra taxes just to fund you guys. We got to figure out some way to, the spoonful of sugar help the medicine go down. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, the money is going to go to schools. The first, I forget, some amount, I forget, the first certain amount that's raised will go to schools. All schools in the city of Portland. So it's not just Portland Public Schools. It's David Douglas, Centennial, Reynolds, Riverdale. And that money will be allocated based on student population to pay for arts and music teachers in the schools. Once we've paid for those, any money that's left over can then go to the Regional Arts and Culture Council.
Okay.
And so went on the ballot. But come on, it's Portland. It passed by 2-1.
Right.
I mean, it was just phenomenal.
It's hard to find a tax that Portland won't pass.
But it wasn't actually, this, it wasn't actually bringing music and art back to schools. It was like, hey, here's a woman who weaves plastic straws together out of her garage. We've now given her, this is just an example, but I've seen people come in to my kid's school and it's not too dissimilar. Some of it's cool. Some of it's not too dissimilar from this. We're going to give her, $5,000 to go to all these schools, and it's called an artist in residency, and she's going to spend a week teaching you how to weave these plastic straws together. And that is art.
Yeah, and money's fungible.
Art class.
So, money's fungible. So
and they apply for grants.
Yeah.
And they get it. And then they come into these schools and they do their thing. They're culturally, a lot of the time, specific thing.
Is that kind of your understand? So there's no money going straight to schools.
Oh no, they get a check.
Okay, they do.
Not to school. It goes to the district.
District. Okay.
But ultimately, the artist, right, applies for that grant, and then they come in. But they're
no, they could be hired.
They could be hired.
So like
as a full-time teacher.
You can have a music teacher, sitting in your school, and probably some portion of their salary is going to be paid for.
Is this theoretical, or do we know that there are music teachers floating around out there whose at least portion of their salary is paid for with RAC? Because I've never heard that.
There's never been.
There's
never been an audit that connects
and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
There's no transparency around this arts tax.
Oh no.
The way you're describing the total amount that's collected, it's hard to believe that any of that could feasibly be spread out across all these schools anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a whole lot. You
Yeah.
know, you're probably looking
Yeah.
at maybe a half to a three-quarter full-time
Right,
equivalent
right, right.
if you're lucky. And, and Portland, of course, gets the most because we have the biggest district. And the thing is, for RAC, they really got the short end of the stick because they
Right,
thought
right.
this is going to be the gusher of money for them. And it turns out that because collections are so terrible and the collections costs are so high, after giving the money to the schools, there's almost nothing left for
Right.
RAC.
Because all the overhead.
So they totally got skunked on this deal, which is kind of funny and I really enjoy. But the problem is it's just such a wasteful use of money because, you've got the collections costs, which are phenomenal. You've got the non-compliance costs, which are phenomenal. Plus you've got the political damage. Every time people see that little letter in the mail, you could, I bet you if you had if you looked at everyone's iPhone or iWatches, you'd see blood pressure just spiking,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like,
How can we
F
get rid
you,
of it?
what is this about? Yeah, 'cause I've never heard anyone say, oh, this isn't awesome.
It's
No,
one.
no.
There's a couple things because I was going to ask something about what you were just asking, but I guess I was talking about this, complaining about it, was saying just the cost of the mailers alone is
Oh,
like
yeah.
pretty high just to send those out every year, and
Oh, well, I mean, you're looking at the postage, but the thing is,
Yeah.
too, is, all those mailers have a trifold letter inside it that are sealed. That a lot of people don't. I used to do quite a bit of nonprofit mailer work. That there's a big cost.
Yeah, people
to
think
just
it's not, but it
assembling
is.
that sort of stuff. And the city of Portland has its own print shop, but that print shop is run like an enterprise, so it's not free. They bill the
Right.
different departments for the
It's like
print
an
shops.
internal business.
Yeah, it's like an internal business. Yeah. So, it's not cheap to mail
Yeah.
those things out. And, like I said, I think that the response rate is relatively low. And so it would be, the city could do more with less if it just got rid of the arts tax and just, well, I wouldn't want them to cut a check to the schools. I don't think they should be cutting checks to schools because schools are schools. They have
They
their own
just
money. If you
got a
want to
new
be
bond,
the
yeah.
education commissioner, Sam Adams said, I'm going to be the education mayor. Part of me says, screw that. If you want to be the education whatever, run for the friggin' school board. Don't run for city council.
that's right.
That's
Yeah.
not your job. We've got enough problems as a city
That's
that
right,
we
that's
don't need
right.
to be getting into other
Taking on
people's business.
education, too,
Yeah,
and
there's definitely enough problems for them to tackle
It's like,
already.
oh, gee, you've run out of stuff to do?
Right.
It's like, come on,
Yeah.
man.
Everything's hunky dory. Because when you were asked how do we get rid of it, did you guys both see there was some recent thing about a kind of a revamp to it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Somebody was trying to like
Dan Ryan was polling on
Was that Dan? Okay.
getting rid of the arts tax and replacing it with a
A
new
new-
parks and arts
Okay.
property tax
Okay.
that would be, depending on
the answer is no.
3 to 5 times more than the arts tax.
Wow. Okay.
And
No.
this would be a
That's
ballot
a
measure.
hard
but
no
it's a
for me.
property. Is that what
It
you're
would-
property tax?
It'd get rid of the arts tax and then bring in a new property tax.
Okay.
Now,
Which we already have some of the highest.
I'm not an initiative expert,
Well,
but
no,
but I
it's
think
not.
you have this problem with
mean-
what's known as the single subject rule on ballot measures, because that sounds like you'd be doing two things with your ballot measure: getting rid of the arts tax and imposing a property tax.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think you'd have a real hard time passing muster on that. But the thing is, this is what really drives me crazy, is that there are some important things that council just punts on and decides to send to the voters when they don't understand that
Or
right
they
now with
don't.
our current composition of city council, all you need are 3 votes. You could get 3 people on city council within a month to vote to get rid of the arts tax. You only need,
I don't know that they could. I don't know that they could. I think Renee and Dan would. I don't know. Mingus and Wheeler are all we usually know what Carmen Rubio is going to do, which is not what Renee and Dan do. And Mingus and Wheeler are all, now. I mean, Mingus used to be, I think, pretty in line with Dan and Renee Gonzalez. Now, since he started this mayoral campaign, which I don't know what's going on with that. I don't want to know. I just know it seems to be in debt, and he seems to need to be able. He needs to be. It looks like he needs to pay it off. Otherwise, what is he doing? But
You don't know if they have the political
I
muster
don't
to do
think
that.
they do. All I
It's-
see are 2
my
votes over
pitch to
here.
Ted Wheeler is,
It's
you want to go out a hero? Here's how you
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
out a hero.
What's
You
in
go out
it?
a hero and say,
Sure.
I was the one who killed the arts tax.
Yeah.
I got it. I got Renee to vote for it, and I got either Dan or Mingus to vote for it.
It's an interesting
He won't do
question
it.
because I would think it'd be wildly popular, but I
Oh,
don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
they would carry you through the streets on
I
a
know.
litter like you were the king if you got rid of that.
But this is
There
what
would be
drives
there would be
me.
hosannas. You would
Yeah.
have people screaming.
Yeah.
No,
in
that's
this-
right. And that would be his legacy. But this is what drives me nuts about Ted Wheeler. There are a million things that he could do like that. You named one of them. That's a simple one. That's an easy one. They could do that, I don't know, in a couple weeks. They could throw that on the agenda. Why? What is he doing?
Yeah.
Why not?
I see. It's funny because I see your point too of like I just couldn't picture that actually happening.
Well, the reason I know that is because we went to City Hall to beg them to put the Police Accountability Commission back on the ballot so that the voters could vote on it. Because the argument was, oh wow, we're looking around here since we defunded the police, and we're realizing we don't have any police. And we're looking around here and we're sort of realizing that we have all of this police accountability anyway, and we didn't know that.
Mhm.
And we're getting body cameras now, thank goodness. And then it was, we're learning all these things about this commission. We're learning that the people on this commission are going to be disciplining police. We're learning that they may be firing police.
Mhm.
We're learning that the legislature has changed it so that they can interfere with bargaining. We're learning that the people on the commission are people who identify as being over policed. They don't want to go on a police ride along because it will lead to trauma. They're getting their own personal security detail. I mean, the more you hear about it, the more I think people were looking around and thinking, wow, this sounds like Measure 110 to me. I mean, I voted for this, but I didn't know I was voting for
Right,
this.
right.
And then Renee Gonzalez and Dan Ryan said, let's just send it back. We have the ability to send it back. And Wheeler and Mingus Maps wouldn't do it. And now here we are.
Mhm.
And that thing is I think Aaron Schmautz, the police union, is working on some new ballot measures because the ones he worked on were, it sounds like they're now dead due to Multnomah County judge. And I think the ACLU of Oregon, it sounds like, was the challenger. But now here we are staring down the barrel of this gun with this police, I mean, terrible analogy, but this police shortage and crime and 911 holds and people who need things and serious person crimes, assault, stabbings, shootings, 7 a.m. in downtown, things going on. And what?
Yeah.
You can't just send it back. You
Well,
don't have
I
to
would-
say no, send it back.
I'm making a plea. I think all of us
They
are
won't do it.
making a plea. If they, I wish they would do it. Just get rid of the arts tax.
That's
Yeah, I
okay.
Can we
said
all
if-
agree
I
on
said
that?
if I was running,
It's so easy.
if I was running as a populist, I would run on getting rid of the arts tax
Yeah.
and bringing back the zoo train. If you did that,
Well, yeah.
you would win.
That's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Well, we had a candidate on here who wants to bring back Fairless Square,
Right,
which I think
Mike
would be
Dinapoli,
popular
that was
too.
smart, yeah.
It's I don't know how feasible
Fairless
that is.
Square, that's a TriMet issue. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
zoo train
That's a TriMet issue.
That's
is
Metro.
is a city of Portland thing
nobody
because
wants to
City of
ride
Portland
TriMet
owns
anyway.
Forest Park. They'd have to work with Metro to get it to do that. But Metro always says that the city's the one that's holding them up.
Yeah.
So bring back that zoo train, and man, because there are a lot of parents that would be so happy to have that zoo
I
train back
know.
Mhm.
and get rid of
That's
the arts
really
tax.
smart. Have you told people that? Have you told
I
any
say it all the
candidates
time.
that?
Yeah.
And they say what?
Oh, they all say it's an awesome idea.
And none of them have done anything.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, there's so many no-brainers that and in grand scheme of things, they're not huge dollar amounts,
It
but
would
they
make people
but they're
happy.
politically popular. I think
And it
too.
sounds doable.
I think that the city should essentially give away the streetcar to TriMet.
I do
Just say
too.
because
Gosh,
the
that
street last
thing's-
time I checked, and this was a couple of years ago, the streetcar is sucking down $15 million a year
Just to operate.
in operating costs
Yeah.
from the city of
It
Portland.
wasn't usable when it was nice and shiny.
Well,
Even.
the
It just
funny,
doesn't go
funny thing
anywhere.
about it is there was talk about this at the time, and the streetcar is so crappy that TriMet doesn't want it.
Really.
That's the thing.
They're like, we're not going to take this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
So
they-
dumb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the
You're-
thing
you're-
is, and now they look really scrappy.
Yeah, you're right though. I remember when it was new, I used to have an apartment and then I hear it every day go by. But even when I would try to take it, I'm like, man, this takes like an hour just to get to Northwest Portland from
Right.
Southwest. Yeah, and it's like,
Well, I love looking up at the ticker for when the next one's coming,
Yeah.
Right.
and you're like,
An hour and a half.
I can
I
walk
can
there.
walk.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's
20
what I would
minutes.
do. I'd walk to like
Me too.
23rd or 21st in less time than the streetcar.
That's what we're all doing, I think. Yeah.
All right, I want to get into PERS a little bit.
Right.
I know there's a lot in there. Mainly, I just wanted to get on it because I think after that, what was it, New York Times story? Or
Yeah,
I
that was
think
talking about why it was a headline in the New York Times about why that our schools are broke in part because of PERS,
right.
and that it was football coaches and highly paid, it sounded like OHSU people, and that not only would they have to die, but their spouses would have to die to stop making these enormous payouts.
Yeah, and I just feel like people forget about like that's dragging our state financially down.
I've given a few talks on PERS. I've been working on PERS ever since I moved up here, and in fact, I testified before the Oregon Supreme Court on the first said PERS reforms in 2003. So I've been doing a lot of PERS stuff. I am involved in some litigation lawsuits involving PERS payments and so forth. So I think I know.
New York Times article was 2018.
What's that?
That New York Times article was 2018. I'm trying to remember when the first PERS reforms were that you would have worked on. It was probably pre that.
The first of the most latest PERS reforms were in the late 90s when they created the third tier of PERS, which is now known as OPSRP, Oregon Public something, whatever. People call it Tier 3. And then what happened was almost all the problems with PERS finances are from Tier 1, which are the oldest employees, and to a certain extent, Tier 2. Tier 3, it looks a lot, it's not quite, but it looks a lot like a typical 401k plan.
That's what I've heard.
Not 100% right on that, but that's close enough for what we're talking about. So the first PERS crisis really happened with the dot-com bust, because what happened was under some of the Tier 1 stuff, if you're an employee, you have an account, have a PERS account. And so there's money sitting in that account. And, you or the state puts money in each paycheck, but they also invest it. And so you generate a return. And what happened was they had this guaranteed rate of return. At the time, it was 8%.
Yeah.
8%.
It's
Can you
incredible.
Guaranteed,
Today,
no matter how the market
Yeah,
did.
that's
Can
crazy.
you imagine?
But here's the real kicker. If it was over 8%, the PERS board could then decide how much of that excess to deposit in accounts or how many to dump into the system to shore it up.
Okay.
In the 90s, before the dot-com bust, they took all of it and credited it to accounts. So like if there was one year where there's like a 23% return, and those all went
to recipients? Is that what you're saying?
Well, into their accounts.
Wow.
Into their accounts.
So there was no treasure chest to pull from when things went bad.
Yes. And then here's where things get crazier. So if you're in Tier 1, you've got your money sitting in the account. So let's say you've got $1 million sitting in your account. When you retire, what they do is they say, okay, we'll take this $1 million. We figure out how long you're expected to live and how much investment returns are going to be. And then we'll pay you out over the rest of your life based on it. Or that's the annuity plan. The other thing is what was known as money match. They just take the money that's in your account. You got $1 million, they double it, put in $2 million, and then spread that out over your expected life. Okay. By law, they had to give the higher of the two. And so what happens because of those booms?
Say that again, but talk about the money match again.
Money match
what was that?
So you got $1 million sitting in your retirement account. When you retire, they say, okay, boom, now you have $2 million. That's the match. They match the $1 million with another
Why
million.
did they do that?
Jackpot mode or something.
That's just the way the law was written.
Yeah.
And that's different than paying you out over time through the course of your life?
Right. Assuming an 8% return.
Okay, so then I would talk to somebody like you, or I'd talk to, I guess, an investment advisor, and I'd say, okay, like I'm healthier and I'm unhealthy or whatever, and so what's going to be best for me?
The state PERS board runs their model, their actuarial model based on your life expectancy,
and
says, here's how much you would make under.
Here's
how much you'd make under the one system. Here's how much you'd make under the other system.
They'll tell you.
You have to get the highest.
Okay, I got it.
You have to give you the highest of the two.
Okay.
And so that caused a
So of
huge
course that's
problem.
going to be the highest every
And,
time, right?
and the money match, is
Almost every
that
time.
it's just doubling, or is that
It's doubling.
okay?
Why? So the law, I'm sorry. I didn't know this. The law, the law said when you retire, they double your retirement money?
Yeah.
Whatever's sitting in there? They
Yeah.
just, in addition to, let's say, the guaranteed
So that
8%.
money's well,
So
you could
that
kind of think of
means,
it as funny money. You could kind of think of it,
It's just a number at the time, and
it's just a number, right? And then when you retire, that
until it
number becomes
wasn't.
real, and then
that's when it becomes actualized.
But okay, but when you retire, it does become real, right? Because they've said we'll double whatever it
well,
is.
it's real in the sense of how, but that doubling determines how much you get each month in your checks. So like you couldn't just, if you
Yes,
had $1 million
that's
and
right.
then they double it to 2, you can't just
You don't
walk into
cash
PERS and say,
out.
give me 2 million.
Right.
You don't cash out. But also you're getting a guaranteed, are you still getting a guaranteed 8% on whatever is slushing around in
On
there
the
that
2
you're
million, you
not?
don't get the 8%.
Okay,
But if they do it the other
I
one,
got
you
it.
get the
Yeah.
8%. And so what
Interesting.
happened is over in the early days of the crisis was driven by money match. Now, even for tier 1 people who are retiring, because we had big stock drops and so forth, most people are
Yeah.
actually not getting the money match today. Anyway, so
Yeah.
late 90s, early 2000s, we had a PERS crisis because we were just crediting these accounts way more money
so
than we
many
were actually earning.
payouts. Yeah.
So, and that's when the PERS fund had what's known as an unfunded actuarial liability of about $1 billion.
Okay.
And this was a crisis. So an unfunded actual liability, again, it's a fiction. It's a make-believe thing. It says, okay, let's pretend we shut down PERS and had to liquidate it. In other words, we owe people a bunch of money. We have a bunch of money. If we took all the money we have and paid off all the people we owe, what's left? It turns out at that point in 2003, it was negative $1 billion.
Okay.
So we were $1 billion short of what we had to pay.
So even after selling everything involved, negative $1 billion. Yeah.
Right. So we owed more than we had, $1 billion. So that was a crisis. The governor at the time burned through a lot of political capital. The Democrats in the legislature
Who was
burned
our
through a lot.
governor?
I think it was Kit Sauber at that time.
Okay,
or
yeah, I
maybe
think you're right.
Kulongoski, but no, I think it's
Yeah.
Kit Sauber. And did a bunch of PERS reforms on
Right.
just a bunch of stuff. And long story short, the courts kicked it out because they say that PERS benefits are a contractual
It's a
agreement
contract, yeah.
between the employee and the government, and you can't interfere with the contract. That's actually in the Oregon Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. Fair enough. So the only way that you can change PERS is if you don't make any beneficiary any worse off.
Okay.
So if they did the reforms in some way that the PERS beneficiaries were richer, you could do them. But if you made them richer, then you're not solving the problem.
It's not really helping you. Yeah.
So fast forward, there's another set of PERS reforms under Kulongoski that also got kicked out. Now we're to today. Now that unfunded actuarial liability is roughly $28 billion.
Wow. So it's just grown.
It's grown
this whole time.
It was $1 billion 20 years ago, and it's $28 billion today, and no one gives a rip about solving it. Because
And is that something that could, like a bubble, just burst at some point? Because
no. Well, yes and no.
Okay.
So the problem with PERS is it's boring.
Yeah.
It's not sexy.
It's boring.
Yeah.
It's complex, and it's seemingly intractable. So, Democrats don't want to rock the boat with the unions because the unions, there are some powerful legislators who are no longer legislators because they did PERS reforms and
ended their career.
And ended their career.
Mm-hmm.
Republicans, they're powerless, but also they've given up because it's just whistling in the wind.
Yeah.
So no one really, even though they say they care, they don't really care. They don't want to do anything. They kick the can down the road. And the thing is, they can, because the way that PERS is funded is it's essentially a payroll tax on what are known as the employers. So the city of Portland, the school district, the state itself, they are employers. And so PERS, based on the outstanding liabilities of each of those employers, assesses essentially a tax, a payroll tax on
Mhm.
those to pay them. And the average across all governments in Oregon is around 25%. So if you're paying someone $100,000 a
Wow.
year
Wow.
in salary, another
25,000.
$25,000 on top of that,
Wow.
they don't get, but another 25,000 is paid by the school district for that person. And so that makes public employees really, really expensive.
Yeah.
So if you talk to public employees and you say, man, you guys are overpaid, and they're like, no, we're not. And you look at their paychecks and you're like, you're right. You're not really overpaid.
But
You're
until
making about what you should be making.
until they retire, I guess.
But the
Oh, then they're
cost.
making more than they've ever made. Yeah, I mean,
But see, that 25,000 extra that they're paying isn't just for that person.
That's what I was going to say.
It's for the people who are
That's
currently
for the
retired.
people that are already retired.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So you may
And-
not
or
get that.
beneficiaries.
You may not
yeah.
see any of that.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that makes public employees really, really expensive, even though they're not paid like they're expensive.
Right.
And so I kind of grouse when people say, "Oh, public employees are overpaid." I mean, some are, but on average,
It's not that they're overpaid, but they're expensive.
they're expensive.
Yeah.
They're over, and because of the benefits, namely the PERS. And so, that
Who has a pension anymore? I mean, just ask people, you're going to work where? Oh, that's great. Congratulations on your new job. Will you have a pension? I mean,
well, it's funny because people are, making fun of Tim Waltz for not having any stocks or anything like that.
Yeah.
The dude's getting 3 pensions.
Oh, I know.
Oh, okay.
I think I am not.
He's got plenty of stocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not
They're
wor-
just coming at him in the form of
It's
pensions.
in a pen. I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
3 pensions. I
Yeah,
mean,
because he's
he's making
teacher,
more than he's ever made in his life.
teacher, Army, Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah. And each one of those has a separate,
Yeah.
retirement.
And look, they would say that's how we incentivize people to take those jobs. And I don't necessarily disagree. I just think it's really interesting that the private sector used to do things like that. And even when I started working at a law firm in, I don't know, early 2000s, we didn't have a pension, but we had something better than just you get to save your money in these investment vehicles for your retirement, and you get to decide how much of it comes out of your paycheck, and maybe you'll be incented by the IRS to do that. And every once in a while we might throw a little extra in there. No, I mean, a lot of people had some variation of, there were matching contributions, there were, hey, we start with, I don't know, we take 10% of your salary's this, we're going to take 10% of it and we throw it into.
Yeah, and the reason why we don't
have that anymore.
And the reason why is because companies that did that went under, or their pension funds went insolvent. And we have a whole government agency called the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation that is designed to deal with this problem of pensions essentially going bankrupt.
So how do we keep these government entities? I guess that was the question in the New York Times in 2018, and probably why it made the cover. How do we keep these? Do we? I don't know. Maybe we don't. How do we keep these governmental entities? That's PERS reform, right? That's what you were working on, from going bankrupt, from going under, in the same way all these companies did. And just, I mean, are you saying that public entities, are you saying they can't do pensions anymore? It's not feasible.
They can't. And Tier 3 solves part of that. A better idea if you had a Tier 4 would be to go to a pure 401k type program, because there is a pension part of Tier 3, but it's not as big. Go to a pure 401k. I think with all the Supreme Court decisions, Oregon Supreme Court decisions, there's really nothing you could do about Tier 1 or Tier 2 except for wait for them to die.
Until it's ended, yeah.
And they're beneficiaries.
If you really wanted to do something bold, you would get a constitutional amendment that would remove that line in the Constitution. You could say something like, shall not interfere with contracts. Public employee pensions are not considered contracts.
The unions will go nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, they go nuts and lose. I mean, but
that's how you'd have to deal with it.
That's how you'd have to deal with it. But again, going back to why is this a problem? So now you look at why, so now if a teacher in Oregon costs 30 or 40% more than somewhere else, that means you're going to have a fewer number of teachers. When you have a fewer number of teachers, you have bigger class sizes. With bigger class sizes, you have worse performance. And it ripples through everything. The foster care system, that's a PERS crisis. The employment department system, it's a computer problem, but it's also...
You're saying they don't have the money to hire people because they're spending it on pensions?
Well, it's that each person is so expensive,
Yeah.
and the tax revenues aren't keeping pace with
Yeah.
with those increasing costs, and so it just gets more and more expensive to hire people. And that's why I'm surprised when there's ever talk about PERS reforms. I said, you would expect to see those hearing rooms just filled with local government officials. You'd have Ted Wheeler, the school board, coming in and say, you have got to fix PERS because PERS is killing our budget. This is the reason why we can't have enough teachers, why we don't have enough para educators, because it's so expensive to hire them with PERS. You need to fix PERS. No, they just stay silent. Let the crazy Republicans come in and say fix PERS, and of course, then the people on the committee just say, "Oh, there's the crazy Republican saying crazy Republican stuff," and we kick the can down the road. And the problem with PERS is that PERS is literally designed to kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
The PERS is designed because all the reforms that were done were saying we don't have enough money to deal with the problem today, but future us will get to deal with it, right? Well, guess what? At some point, the future arrives, and you just hope that there's another future us that you can kick the can to.
Yeah, it's just wild.
How does this end?
It reminds me of national Social Security, the
Right.
same kind of.
Right.
I think the way it will end is you will see. I mean, there's some really tiny local governments, like a little fire department somewhere, where their PERS tax is 100% of payroll. And I think what you might find, the way the stuff will really start hitting the fan will be if you have some tiny like fire district or something that all of a sudden becomes insolvent. It goes bankrupt.
I've been waiting for that to happen.
And so I think that will happen. We don't have a very good apparatus in the state of Oregon to deal with municipal bankruptcies. So that's going to have a huge cascading effect. I think that's what, Portland's going to do. It's not going to be Portland or Metro. It's going to be somewhere.
Small town.
Well, they'll just keep raising, taxes, or they did the school.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the firehouse and
all of a sudden, we can't pay for this anymore.
In Wooded Creek or whatever, is gone.
Is tier, and I know we have to wait, like the New York Times said in 2018, for these tier 1, and it sounds like tier 2 the recipients and beneficiaries to die off. But what about does tier 3 actually fix it, do you think?
It makes it better.
Yeah.
It makes it better.
So we'll be in a better position.
And it's not just, I'm a little flippant about dying off. I mean, dying off is part of it, but the other thing is is for them to retire, because once you retire, you're not racking up the obligations as much, because they're not.
That 25% isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless they're allowed to take another
and then
job,
that's why
they
you get
draw
these,
from that.
And then you get these crazy, you've talked about like the OHSU doctors. The classic one was Mike Bellotti, who's now no longer on the top of the list, but he was
for a long time.
Yeah, the highest paid. Right?
$480K a year just in PERS benefits.
In PERS benefits.
And the thing is, the way that the on the annuity side is calculated is it's based on your what they call final average salary, which really isn't a final average salary, because it's either the final salary for your last 3 years or your 3 highest consecutive years.
Wow.
And so when you see, someone who's like a legislator, like who's been a legislator for like 10 years, and all of a sudden they get beamed up and they're serving on something like the Northwest Power and Conservation Commission, pulling in close to 200K. Part of it is get that 200K, but it spikes their PERS,
right?
Because that
kind of cherry pick those highest
put into their final average salary. And so you may hear about PERS spiking. That's what happens when you have someone who doesn't seem like they were really in a high position and all of a sudden get elevated up to a high position. Part of it is, especially if they're older, the idea is to spike their PERS.
You get those 3 high numbers, and then you're left with a way higher retirement.
Yeah.
Interesting. I've never heard of that, actually.
I didn't know that.
There was I forget her name, but there was some legislator, about 10 years ago, who created this tiny agency where the director would get paid a huge amount of money. And it turns out that she was going to be the director of the agency. People saw that through that pretty quick. Just to spike her PERS.
Heard that, yes. PERS spiking. I've never heard that. That's interesting. I'm getting close to the end here, I promise.
I'm having fun.
I did want to, I know. I was curious to ask you, and I know this is another can of worms, but just your general thoughts about Metro.
Oh,
Our
I
third layer of
I
government.
know, yeah. People, I try to bring it up on the show because people don't seem to understand that it exists, first of all, and second of all,
Yeah.
that they have a lot of money and power, and
They have more money and power
yeah.
now than they did.
Yeah.
We have a whole show on Metro
I
because
know, I know. Yeah.
Metro is fascinating because Metro was actually kind of in the early days was kind of a Republican good government idea.
Really?
The thinking was, geez, we've got all these, we got cities and counties and, multiple water districts and fire districts and all this other. Wouldn't it be awesome if we just took the whole metro region, put them under one regional government so you wouldn't have 8 different parks bureaus, 8 different water districts, 8 different, fire
And that
bureaus.
was that a Tom McCall land use kind of move?
It was just, it's this.
Right.
It was the post-war.
Is it sort of the
Okay.
urban growth
Okay.
boundary?
We can lock our elbows
I
together and
see.
we can get stuff done.
Yeah.
Seem more efficient or something.
And originally, Metro was designed as just a pure planning authority, like
Okay.
originally just to make maps. And then some federal laws changed where you needed to have, I forget what the technical term is. It's an MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so in a lot of places, it's either the city or the county. But in Oregon, that became Metro. So now with that, Metro kind of had a little bit of federal back and a little imprimatur on it, because now they're doing something that the feds are saying the regional governments should do. And so then they decided to kind of, let's make Metro legal, in other words, create it as an actual governmental organization. And so it was put on the ballot, voters approved it, but then they also disapproved allowing for a property tax to support metros. They were an agency
Interesting.
with no money.
Was that on the same ballot, or that was later? Or
I think it might have been on the same ballot. So
Wow,
they,
wow.
voted for one
they're
and not the other.
capping it, and yeah.
Well, they've certainly made up for that.
Well, what they did then is they, but they had authority over garbage and waste, and so garbage was the gold mine for Metro for a long time. So like all the regional waste collection goes through Metro facilities, and they charge let's call it an above competitive rate for that.
They're
Is
getting
that
a lot of
still true?
profit off of that.
Right, they profit off it.
Is that still true?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, in the city of Portland, they only pick it up twice a month.
Yeah, every 2 weeks.
Well, they don't do the picking up. So when
They just
when
process
your
it.
guy, so my guy's Hyberg takes it and they take it to the Metro processing station. Metro processes it. So like in the city of Portland,
The garbage trucks are contractors. Is that kind of weird?
garbage they're franchised.
Okay.
So
Got it.
so like I have Hyberg, you might have Rose City. They have a little local monopoly
Yeah.
in that neighborhood. So if I don't like Hyberg and I want to go to Rose City, too bad, so sad. Hyberg's my guy.
That's it.
And so they get there. And that's a whole nother conversation. But that then they take their stuff and take it to the Metro facility, and then Metro then processes it and sends it to landfills or recycling or whatever. But they charge those haulers for that.
Where does the Metro money show up? When you get your garbage bill, is there some, and I just haven't analyzed it, but is there some Metro money that shows up on there, or does the Metro money in regard to, well, it wouldn't be property taxes because if you're a renter, you're paying for this somehow. Is it, I guess, is it part of this? Maybe they charge the, I don't know, the franchisee, and the franchisee
I think
charges
that's what
you.
You're asking a tough question because I haven't looked at my garbage bill in probably
Yeah,
10 years.
none of us have,
Just pay it.
obviously.
Just pay it.
And I think that's what they're relying on.
Yeah.
But now that I sit here and think about it,
That'd be my guess.
I'm
is
going to look at it.
all the pickup or the truck companies are doing their own kind of money collection, and they pay Metro or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So for a long time, most of the money from Metro came from garbage.
Okay.
But then they are allowed to charge property taxes on for bond measures
Right.
and operating levies, and so they've traditionally done that. So they have like the Parks and Nature
the zoo
bond,
bond,
the
yeah.
zoo bond.
Yeah.
They can have operating levies that fund those specific
They have
purposes.
a homelessness tax.
Well, see, that's new, and then they also have enterprises. So like the enterprises would be the Convention Center, Expo Center,
Oh,
Portland
sure.
5.
Portland 5.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Now, under
Portland
the Metro Charter, they are, to put it bluntly, they're not allowed to profit from those. So they can't They can't.
I'm dying to know where that money is going, because according to
It doesn't matter.
the
They're losing. So they're losing money. So
Symphony and the Art Museum, they're being hammered by Portland 5.
oh yeah.
Those rents are going up exponentially all the time, and they're paying them to exist.
Oh, Metro's the worst landlord in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're saying they don't have any money?
Well, no, they're not allowed to make a profit.
Right.
Off of it.
But
So
where's
like
it
if I
going?
was running the Keller, as a business, I'd be trying to figure out, okay,
Sure. No, of
how
course.
do
But where's it going?
well, they just need to break even. Well, they don't know how to run the business. So then you fast forward, and then you
I
get
don't
to the
know.
supportive housing services tax, which a lot of people call the homeless tax. And it's kind of a fascinating story, because this group called the Here Together Coalition first approached Multnomah County, and they said, "Yeah, we're not really too into this." And then they went to Metro and said, "Hey, we got this idea for a new tax to support homeless services." And Metro was like, "Yeah, I don't know about this." And they said, "Well, I think we'll put it on the ballot." Like, oh, all right, let's talk turkey.
Then they got excited.
And so what happened? I mean, it to me is just mind-blowingly bonkers. This Here Together Coalition, which is essentially the nonprofit industrial complex dealing with homeless services,
Because they just like, here's a big pool of money we could get.
they literally crafted the measure.
you
They
imagine?
crafted the measure, how the money would be spent. Metro even calls it the Here Together framework.
So craven.
And then they just took it, copy pasta, put it on the ballot, and of course it passed. And that's how we got the supportive housing services tax, with the weird formula that the money is distributed in a crazy
I
way
never
based
knew
on
that, yeah.
population to the counties.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean,
it's
this
bonkers.
is another like abolish the arts tax thing. Do you think Metro should just, I want them to just go away. I know that would create a lot of
People are
problems.
going to
but-
go
see,
nuts. if
That's what
they-
gets me. They're talking right now about putting a measure on the ballot, possibly in November, to rejigger how some of that money is spent, because it's bringing in way more money
Right.
than
I
they
forgot
thought.
about, I did see that. Yeah.
And they're like, well, we're going to ask the voters about this. You don't have to. You get 7 commissioners on Metro Council. All it
And they
takes
could
is 4,
change
and you
it.
could change it. You could get rid of it. You could change it. You could sweep all the money into the general fund if you want. I think a lot of people think that because it's on the ballot measure, that it's just carved in stone and can never be changed. No, it's an ordinance like any other ordinance. It could be changed. It could be repealed. And so I always see a lot of these ballot measures. Now, some ballot measures are required, like to get this income tax in the Metro, it had to be approved by voters.
Yeah.
There's no way that's in the charter. But changing the rate,
modifying it.
changing it doesn't require the voters.
Interesting.
But so I always think of it as a sign of weakness or cowardice when a council says, "Oh, we're going to ask the voters on this," because in other words, it's saying we don't have.
They don't want to take the accountability of.
They don't want the
voting on
accountability.
it.
Yeah.
I see. That is interesting, because I was going to ask if that's more a way of measuring the public, but
It's
I
part
see,
of it.
I see what
it's
you're
part
saying.
of it, but you could make an argument either way. But
Yeah.
I think there is a certain amount of cowardice. It's like,
See, they just got lucky though with that tax, because in the past year, some of these counties, like I know Ben West has been working a lot in Clackamas County to harness some of that money and actually do things with it, like put it towards detox and rehab and put it into.
Are you talking about how they got denied the?
Well, I'm
No,
talking about what they've done to get people off the streets. They did it in Washington County too.
Yeah, but do you know what I'm talking about? How they?
Yes.
that's a whole different thing. Yeah,
I
that's
do,
the
but
initial.
I think it is different.
But
But
see-
but their argument is, hey, we've harnessed some of this money and we've actually used it for good. And then of course the point in time count came out, the most recent one, which everybody agrees is unreliable because it's a federal government count that is self-reporting.
Yeah.
So we all agree it's unreliable because we're asking
It's an honor
probably,
system
you know,
kind of-
people whose lives are so unmanageable that they live on the street,
Mhm.
who
No,
they are.
you don't want to
and-
even know how the count's done.
I've heard it's a very dirty business. No, I don't
I know
really
it
want to
is.
know how it's done. Yeah, no, I don't really want to know how. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you must know because of
Well, it changes
economics.
every time.
Yeah,
because
it's
they have different-
unreliable.
But the thing, what's interesting, you mentioned Ben West and Clackamas County. It's funny because Clackamas County is actually in a better position to do what he wants to do, because the way
Oh, interesting.
that measure is written is the money flows to the counties. Now, Metro has to
Right.
approve their plan before the money is released. And so in some sense, Clackamas County is in a better position because they, in some ways, they're due that money.
Yeah.
Who's in a really crappy position is the city of Portland, because the money flows to the county, not to the city.
Right.
So
Right. No, I know.
anytime that Portland wants to get some of that money, they have to talk turkey with
Jessica
Multnomah
Bacon
County.
Peterson.
And we all
Yeah.
know that relationship is just doing great, right? Between the city and the county.
And do you think it will get better?
Right.
I mean,
know.
I
When people say I'm going to Forge, I can't stop laughing. I'm going to Forge. I'm going to be the Brit. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've heard enough.
It's
You have no idea
it's
what you're
frustrating.
talking
And obviously,
about.
I'm being sarcastic. The relationship's horrible between them, but
Well, and I know I sound cynical, but I'm just a realist. I
Yeah,
mean,
no,
I'm
I-
just
I
looking
agree
back
with- I
at
agree with you.
everything at Multnomah County in my recent memory since Deb Kafori was chair, and nobody can talk sense to the county chair, period.
Mhm,
I think the Joint Office of Homeless Services is probably the worst
mhm.
organization we have. And
Yes.
and I think in some
It
it's
is.
not be. I mean, parts of the personalities, but part of it's just the organization. It is
Yes.
designed to hide accountability,
Yes,
right?
it is.
Because what you have is this joint office,
Joint. Cindy
right?
just writes a
Which
check.
means you've got 3 organizations that can always point. Well, actually 4 if you think about it. 3 you got the city, the county, and then the joint office, and then the constellation of nonprofit
Right.
folks, right? So if anything goes wrong, you could be like that Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing
Right,
at each
right,
other, right?
yeah.
It's no one's fault. It's
Yeah.
everyone's fault. You know, it is perfectly designed so that no one is
Yeah.
accountable.
And that's why they'll never get rid of it.
That's why I think in some sense the old system was better, even though it was imperfect, where, you know, the city's in charge of sticks and bricks, and the county's in charge of social services, and then they have to work together on those 2 things
Right.
together. But the joint office just
Yeah, it's
it's a
made
mess.
everything worse. I don't know why. You know, we've spent a lot of money and just got
It's the
negative.
It's the
results.
opposite of the Midas touch, right? It's the fecal
Right?
touch.
Yeah, right.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I was thinking too. There's maybe just a little preview of my. I'm studying up a lot on my single transferable vote, but the finger pointing thing reminded me of a question I keeps coming up of the multi-member districts that we're gonna have. If
Oh,
people,
Jesus Christ.
if
I
we have
know.
three counselors per district, I think there should be a lot of finger pointing between who's to blame for certain problems. I don't know. I don't want to open a whole.
Oh,
nother-
no, because
But
this it's funny because you like I said, I have a PhD in economics. I think I'm smart. I'm probably not, but I think I'm smart.
Yeah.
And
I
my
think you're
mom likes to say
smart.
No,
I'm
you're-
smarter
Yeah.
than the average person.
You're smart.
I still don't understand it. And I used to be a member of City Club, and I still get their emails, and they're like, you know, come learn about ranked choice voting. I'm like, oh, interesting, a little workshop. And it's like 90
3
minutes.
hours long.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
like- I'm like, so ranked choice voting is so simple. We
know.
need a 90-minute workshop
I
to
know.
learn how it works.
Right.
And then if you saw this week's Willamette Week, someone asked about, you know, what are these excess votes and how are they telling
Right,
It's
right.
like this huge thing. And they have algorithms that are named after Europeans. I'm like, dude, if your system of counting votes is so complicated that some European named dude has a special algorithm
Yeah.
to do it, maybe it's not that simple, right?
Yeah.
There's the fruits algorithm is just add up the numbers, draw a line, what's the total, right?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that
Stop moving votes around.
yeah. And I think the 3-member district is really wild because, you know, you get to rank up to 6,
Mhm.
but what do they call it? Single transferable vote.
Right.
Single vote. So technically speaking, I'm casting 1 vote, but I'm being represented by 3 people.
Yeah. Well, I just
Well,
recently.
So who am I voting for?
Yeah.
You know, if I vote for one guy and I like that person, but then there's the other 2 people, by definition, those 2 people didn't get my vote.
yes, that's right.
Mhm.
I mean, shouldn't I be able? What I would like is to be able to, you know, I think they should have seats, right? And so if there's 3 people, even if it's 1 district, there should be people running for each seat, and I should be
Right.
able to pick 3 people to fill those seats.
And I think that's how people think it's going to
Yeah,
work.
probably.
And that's what really scares me is everybody's thinking horizontally and they're thinking I'm going to have my 3. Or if they're thinking ranked choice, they're thinking, well, I've got my number 1, I've got my number 2. And so they feel like they are voting.
Yeah, and you're
Like, I guess my number 2 vote, you be in second place and you be in third place. And if I had to, I'll take you. But I don't think anybody, it's just like you said. I mean, I don't think anybody has any idea how this is actually going to work. And once we throw all that software together, I don't know that they do. I don't know that the city does.
Well, and that's, to me, that's what's really, I'd love to have, maybe you guys should have the, what's his name?
we're gonna have
Andy's going
the
to.
election,
Tim
Tim
Scott.
Scott.
Yeah, he's gonna
Andy's
come on.
going to.
He's great. He's a real straight
And
shooter.
I've
I
heard
like,
good things
Well,
about him.
thank
yeah, he's
goodness.
a great guy. But, the thing is that I'm really worried about is, it's a lot, ranked choice voting tabulation is a lot different from typical vote tabulation because
Right.
you need to have every single ballot in, right? Under the current system, you could start running ballots
Yeah,
as they
As
come
they
in,
do,
Yeah.
yeah.
right?
And on
But
the
here,
news, they'll
you
say
need to have
70%
all
in.
of them in before you could do any
Right,
tabulation
right.
That's
because
interesting. Yeah,
because how they are shifted depends on it.
the calculation.
How it depends on everyone votes.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
calculation requires all of them.
That's
Is
a
that what you're
great-
saying? Yeah.
Right. And
point.
so you have to have all of those votes in.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to be a mess with, and how do you deal with the overvotes and because like if you need 25% plus 1
Right.
to get the seat. But Steve Novik's ran my district. Let's say people love him and he gets 40%. Right? So
So they're gonna.
there's 15% that's extra.
Right. Right.
And the thing is, if he got all 15%, there's a chance that no one else gets 25 plus 1.
Mm.
So you have to then take that extra 15% and do something with it. And then you reallocate those across those people, the people who voted for Novik, number 1, 15% of their votes now get allocated to whatever their second choice is. So when you say, oh, Novik wins, he only got, if I voted for him, he only got 85% of my vote. Someone else got 15%.
Is this rank choice, or are you speaking about rank choice plus single transferable
That's
vote?
the single transferable vote with the ranks. So totally bonkers. Then the question is, what happens with, we've got a couple thousand people in Washington County, a couple thousand people in Clackamas
Right,
County
yeah.
who vote in the
They're
city
part
of
of
Portland.
that.
Yeah.
Their ballots go to those counties.
And they're gonna have to wait for those or something.
What happens?
Are they using
So
the same software?
what's the chain
Yeah.
of custody?
I-
Because
That's a great question. I'll ask.
because
Tim.
those ballots have to end up in Multnomah County to run through the Multnomah County. You
Right.
can't count them separately.
Mhm.
You
That's
have to
right.
count them together. So what is the chain of custody? And then what happens if you have to have a recount in those counties on, say, like a county position?
Mm. Yeah.
And then here's the real
Oh,
kicker.
this just makes my skin crawl.
Under Oregon state law, right, if it's within a half a percentage point,
There's a recall, right? Or a
a hand recount.
recount. Yeah.
Can you imagine doing a hand recount of hundreds of thousands
It's
of
gonna be
ballots
hanging chads
and
all over again,
ranked
but
choice
it's- yeah.
voting?
Yeah.
Is it your understanding,
It is
Eric,
nuts.
that so based on people that I've talked to who, and no, this was prior to city involvement and software, and this was more when charter reform had just passed and we're trying to figure out what single transferable vote is. Willamette Week, I think it was Anthony Effinger, of course, went to the commissioners, the charter commissioners, and they all gave different explanations of what they understood.
Mhm.
One person said, "We don't know, it'll just work. We'll just assume that it works. You just assume it works. You don't look under the hood of the car." And one of the questions, and some of the people who said that they understood this single transferable vote that happens apparently in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Malta, and nowhere else, but I guess here, is that it's possible for somebody to win, a candidate to win with under 25% of the vote.
I'd like to know how. Well, see, that's
Because of
the
single transferable
thing
vote.
is, we're in we are in, I hate the word unprecedented because we see it a lot, but
Well,
this
it
is
is.
unprecedented
Yeah.
because there has, as far as I know, there has never been a single transferable vote, ranked choice voting with single transferable vote in multi-member districts.
Yes.
That too.
That's-
The
Yeah.
multi-member
the-
district
the
part
mul-
is
That's right.
really
Because
the-
if it was like Trump versus
Yep.
Biden, the ranked choice voting and the transferable votes would be completely understandable.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would,
makes
it would
more
be pretty
sense.
close to what
Yeah.
we have
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But this new thing is, the thing is, in the end, you won't know
Right.
who you actually voted
That's
for.
right.
You won't know where your vote
Yeah.
went.
You won't know where it went.
And
Yeah.
I think that's bad for a voter. A voter wants
is,
to know where
yeah.
their vote went, but
So
also
disenfranchising.
it's unfair to the politician because you go to a
Yeah.
politician, you say, "I voted for you," right? And that makes a connection. now what?
Nobody's going to have any idea.
I ranked you 5. I think you got part of my vote.
Yeah, they can't reverse engineer that and figure it out.
Yeah, you're right. We're the only place in the world that does this.
Yeah. There's so many questions I have about when I was listening to one of your episodes recently.
With Sonia Montalbano.
Yeah, and she was saying
really
that
smart.
Having a single transferable vote in multi-member district actually isn't really ranked choice voting, which just like blew my mind.
Which I
was
think
like,
is kind of what you were saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have so many questions about it. Hopefully, in a couple weeks we'll talk to Tim and get him cleared up. Hopefully,
because the thing is, what makes me sad is that like I said, I like Tim Scott. I think he's a smart guy. He always comes across as a straight shooter to me. At this point, I would never accuse him of any sort of monkey business.
Implementing it sounds like what he can.
But even if he does everything on the straight and narrow and completely fair, it doesn't even make a mistake, people still will not believe the result. Yeah. And the thing is, what makes it even worse is the delay.
Yeah.
Because
that's what I was going to ask you earlier. So this is going to delay just the results in general.
Well, even if it's a normal vote, right? This is going to be a really weird year because this is going to be the first presidential year where you have the rule where like the ballots are postmarked, right? So if you think about, if you take all that stuff and apply it to the ranked choice voting, you have the postmark, right? So then you're looking at like at least probably a week after the ballots are done before you can even start running them. Wow. And then maybe another week after that before you get Clackamas and Washington County.
11 days
so it could be a month before you, and that month is the time where, my mom likes to say that an idle mind is the devil's playground.
Right,
That's where you start entering into the devil's playground and thinking about like, well, gee, what's going on? There's a conspiracy. What are they doing with the ballots? What's taking them so long?
And that's my whole worry of it.
How many more are they printing up?
It's not only like seems like it makes voting more difficult, but it's also undermines just the trust and all that stuff, which is just a huge problem right now. Anyway.
That's right. And especially with mail.
Yeah.
I think mail-in voting.
Well, my idea was, the mail-in voting, I think...
Which I love.
I think the upside to the law that said that the state pays the postage for mail-in ballots is, I think, once you have that, you can also have a law that bans ballot harvesting. Because then there is no excuse to get your ballot in on time, right? The old excuse was, oh, gee, people don't have money for a stamp, or they can't get to the drop spot, so we need someone to harvest ballots. No, if all you have to do is just stick your ballot in your mailbox on the day of the election, and your vote's cast, do you really need to harvest ballots anymore?
Yeah. Install some mailboxes and get rid of that argument too.
Okay, I'm going to try to wrap it up. Unless there's anything, other big things you want to talk about, I'm going to go into these goofy questions.
All right, get goofy.
Thank you for that. That was really helpful.
I'm learning so much. And I didn't expect you to like have all this knowledge about that. But yeah, that's great.
Well, I'm a gadfly. I'm interested in things where I could be a pain in the butt.
Okay, let's say you're parking somewhere, regular parking spot. Do you pull in or do you back in normally? Like when you just park
out here. Well, that's parallel. Well, it's kind of parallel.
You parallel out there?
Well, there's no one in front of me, so it's hardly parallel. Yeah. But if I'm like at Fred Meyer, I usually pull in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Is this like some sort of weird like?
Are you a
sociopath?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Surprise.
Do you like crunchy or smooth peanut butter? Maybe you don't like peanut butter.
Growing up, I had peanut butter jelly sandwiches every day for lunch from kindergarten through 12th grade and have not had one since.
Is that true?
Yeah, but I think I would prefer crunchy.
You have not had a peanut butter sandwich since 12th
Peanut butter
grade?
and jelly sandwich, since I was 18.
Wow, okay. But you said crunchy.
Crunchy, though.
Okay.
Do you have it in the house at all?
Yeah, I've got kids, so I buy a ton of peanut butter.
Okay. Has anybody in your household tried the New Season's Himalayan salt peanut butter? Crunchy.
Well, the main peanut butter kid in my house is on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
And so we are very picky about what we have.
Yeah.
It has to be Jif.
Okay.
It has to be Jif. Jif's creamy.
Okay.
That's it. And for milk, it has to be Fred Meyer milk. Fred Meyer milk is the best milk. Trader Joe's is the second. Target is third. And for some reason, he says that Safeway is undrinkable.
Well, okay. Lucerne. I think that's
Lucerne. Yeah. Right. Lucerne. There's something wrong with Lucerne. He says it's salty. I'm like, I don't know. I can't tell. But
I like these milk rankings though. I do too.
Yeah. You could blindfold him.
Wow.
and you can tell. Yeah. It's nuts, man.
So you better get it right.
Oh, you have to get it right. I remember once when my kids were really little, and they love Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Mhm.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch ain't cheap. And so I'm like, screw these kids are like 2 or 3 years old. I'm going to go get the generic. So I got the generic and I
Yeah.
just put it in the
Yeah, yeah.
CTC box. And one day my
Wow,
wife
that's
says,
smart.
comes in and says, Eric, you've got to take that cereal back. I think it's gone rotten. It's like, it's gone bad. I said, hon, I switched the bag. I didn't know my wife was going to eat the cereal.
It's
She ate the
delicious.
cereal. And
And she could tell?
Oh, she could
Yeah.
tell.
Wow. That's funny.
That's funny.
Malto Meal, shout out to them. Do you have a favorite type of French fry? Do you like regular cut, crinkle cut, waffle fries?
Oh, this is a good one.
It is good.
This is a good one.
What's the one with shoehorn? Is that a fry?
Shoehorn.
JoJo's.
I hear
Oh,
about
shoestring.
shoestring. Yeah, I hear about new ones. all
God,
the
those
time.
are good.
Yeah,
Curly fries.
curly fries.
There's a lot of different access.
I
I like
Wedges.
kind of plain French fries, kind of on the thicker side.
Okay.
And I like a McDonald's fry when they're hot, but
Yeah.
if they're
Right, yeah.
more than 5 minutes old, they're not good.
Right.
But I like something a little thicker than
Yeah.
McDonald's.
Okay.
Um,
This is a side question. Do you consider a tater tot a French fry? Because I do.
no.
Okay.
You don't?
Most
Or-
people.
I'm sorry, you consider that a French fry?
I don't see the difference. I
A
asked.
tater tot.
Yeah, because I'm like, it's fried potato. It's the same.
But when
Somebody brought up the seasoning though recently, and I was like, okay, I guess.
probably and the texture.
Tater tots were invented in Oregon, so you got to say
Were
that
they
they're
really?
Is that
yeah,
true? Okay.
yeah. So you got to say or Ida,
I don't
Oregon,
know. I didn't
Idaho?
Know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Huh.
yeah. So you got to
Interesting.
kind of say that they're not French fries because it's something unique to us.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I like that argument.
So if you order French fries, if we go out to eat and you order French fries somewhere, I may expect a plate of tater tots to show. I mean, if you say I order French fries, I can potentially expect a plate of tater tots to show up.
I think you just broke my argument, but but no, I think it's part of the same family.
it's about-
part
I
of the same
agree.
gene.
Well, it's in the family.
genus
It's in the
of-
fried tater
I
family.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I won you guys over.
You win.
Do you, when you're getting ice cream, do you go waffle cone, regular cone, cup?
Cup.
Okay, me too. I just did that a couple days ago, by the way.
But see, actually, what's better than ice cream is gelato.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the best combo is you get a scoop of pistachio, a scoop of chocolate, a scoop of coconut.
That sounds
You
amazing.
do
Where
that?
do you
Yeah.
go do this at? What's your favorite one?
Well, there's a few. Staccato Gelatos go
Those are
to
good,
because it's
yeah.
pretty close. There's one on Division. I forget what it's called. That's really good.
Mhm.
But Staccato's closer.
Okay.
Problem with Staccato is they don't always have all three
Okay.
because it's a pretty good combo, but
Yeah.
it's
And it
hard to
sounds
get
like
all
you
three at
got
the same
your
time.
order.
Yeah,
Like the trifecta.
yeah.
Do you, if there was a gigantic brand you could run or company you could run, is there one you'd want to run if you're forced to?
If I was forced to, oh man, I have to think of it. I want something that's big, makes a lot of money, and everyone loves.
Amazon. Yeah. A lot of people say Amazon.
Amazon, I think that'd be stressful.
Yeah.
Uh,
They're not the most loved as well, at least in
in the old days, I'd probably say Disney because
Oh, okay.
everyone loves Disney, but they're doing a lot of things to make people mad
They
lately.
are,
so-
yeah.
But maybe
Or just
if
Ron DeSantis, but yeah.
I went back in time and I didn't do the things that made people mad.
Yeah.
I don't
like
know.
that.
Disney kind of, you go back and you watch some of those movies and it's like, I mean, I don't know. I don't think you can be old, that kind of an old company and not, you're going to do things that are not within the times, and you're
Well,
always
there's a
going to
lot
get
of
beat up.
problematic stuff.
You're always going to get beat, right? Problematic. You're always going to get beat up for that. It's tricky. But ultimately, gosh darn it seems even people who pick on them. I mean, I just find it hard to believe that Ron DeSantis wouldn't be taking his kids to Disney World. I think he probably is. Otherwise, they'd peg him as the meanest daddy ever. He lives in Florida,
Yeah.
I mean, and he probably loves it. Everybody loves Disney.
Oh, I used to say, I lived in California still, and I was like old and retired. I'd get a Disney annual pass.
A
Yeah, me
pass.
too.
And
yeah.
I'd go in every day. I'd go walk
Yeah.
down Main Street. I'd find one of those park benches right in the middle of the traffic circle and just sit there and just people watch
That's
all
good
day
people
long.
watching.
And at dinner time, I'd go across to that place where they have the fried chicken, and I'd get a fried chicken meal, and that'd be like,
That
oh,
sounds,
It's
yeah, it
clean,
sounds
it's
great.
pretty.
there's
yeah.
that fat guy named Fruits. He comes here every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny. I've heard people who've had that pass, and I get jealous. I'm like, they're just like, yeah, we can just go whenever we want. I'm like,
know.
okay, whatever. Is there any where do you want people to go somewhere to check you out or just go on your socials or whatever? Do you have a website? I don't even know.
No, I thought you meant like a bar or something.
No, yeah. You got
Place in town you hang out where people can eyeball you.
people can find you in person. No, okay.
Yeah, meet me at the Slammer. Yeah. I was tried by the Slammer. I've never been there, but
Okay.
because I love their sign that says, "Have you ever spent time at the Slammer?"
It's a
It's
good
funny.
slogan,
It's
yeah.
funny.
And they always have Christmas lights up, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah.
Like
It
is
Christmas
hilarious.
Christmas lights.
I just have that on here because most people I talk to are candidates and stuff, and I was like, where can we plug your?
Well, the easiest place to find me is on Twitter, which is
Okay.
just my name, Eric Fruits, all one word.
Yeah,
I post pretty frequently,
Yeah.
yeah.
and
That's how I.
and then
found
on
it,
my
too.
profile has links to other stuff.
Cool.
You know,
Well, yeah. Thanks so much.
don't
for
want to
talking
burn my
today.
employers.
Sure.
This was.
No, they employ you.
I could talk to you all day. Like this is just.
Oh, this is a
Thank
blast.
you.
Yeah.
This was fun.
Yeah, this
Thanks
is a
for
dream
coming
come true
on.
for me. It's
Oh, good.
almost better than sitting in a park bench in Disney.
Almost. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Thanks again. Yeah, and you're always welcome back.
Yeah, love to come back.
Awesome.
All right, this is fun.